Welcome back to another episode on BMTA's Maritime Careers and Training podcast. And today we are exploring shoreside bound careers beyond the sea. So today's episode is going to be exploring the many career opportunities that actually await seafarers in terms of coming shoreside, how the skills and disciplines that they've gained over their time at sea can open doors to meaningful roles in management, training, safety, logistics, and many others on a shoreside front. Today, we've got two guests. I'm pleased to welcome back Sam Samuels onto the episode. Sam, how are we doing?
All good again. Nice to see you again, Owen.
And I'm really pleased to announce that today we've got for the first time Darrell Bate on our call, Director of Maritime Training and Development at the Marine Society and Sea Cadets. Darrell, how are you?
Very well. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant. Just for the listeners, Darrell, would you mind just sort of giving us a bit of an overview of who you are, what you've done in your career, and sort of your background in your current role? Just a brief overview.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I ex-seafarer, former seafarer with Cunard Steamship Company, deck cadetship back in the day. I won't quite say which year, but it was a little while back. Sort of came out in the sort of 80s where mass redundancies of British seafarers. So I was caught up in that mix, and sort of went foreign flag briefly, found that conditions were not to my liking, and then stumbled across a shoreside ship operating company near where I lived. Strangely, I had no idea what they were there or what they did, but I essentially walked in. I said, I'm a seafarer. I've just come off a ship. Anything going? And they sort of basically offered me a job as a junior ship operator, and so stayed there and worked there a couple of years, and then sort of did my Institute of Chartered Shipbroking exams. Found myself really enjoying the shoreside life. Became qualified shipbroking, and then went up into London and worked in various ship operating and shipbroking roles. But then sort of got to a point in career I was actually made redundant from a final role, and it gave me a sort of option to sort of switch careers, and I went into education and training, further education and training, and then actually the bulk of my career has been spent in the further education post-16 sector, up to sort of senior level in colleges. And then about 6 years ago, a job came up with the Marine Society, and it was they were looking for someone with a strong education background, but ideally someone who'd got a knowledge of maritime and potentially seafaring. So it was a fantastic role that combined sort of both those careers. So yeah, very fortunate to get that. And 6 years later, I'm very much in that role and sort of combining both those skills. But it was really nice to connect with my original career at sea and actually coming across old colleagues and people that were back in that day.
It's a weirdly small world, and
Yeah.
today we'll all share our different experiences. We've all been at sea on this call, so those of you who listened before, from myself, ex-cadet, third engineer, then came shoreside, and we've all got different reasons for doing it. So in terms of why would you go to shore, my personal experiences, as I've sort of discussed on different an episode, was unfortunately my nan had a stroke when I was at sea. She was really poorly, and she was a big part of me growing up. So I suppose family life and health in terms of family played a big part for me. So I came shoreside due to being very close to my nan and spending a lot of time with her growing up, and I wanted to sort of give her end of life care. And that was the primary reason for me coming shoreside and then trying to learn the different roles. Sam, what were your reasons for sort of coming shore?
Um, Mine was a little bit unfortunate. I'd done 27 years with the Royal Navy and then medically was unable to continue. So they basically put me out the pasture, which was a bit of a shock. It wasn't something I'd planned for. I really enjoyed the life at sea. And so I had to go forward from there and try and take the skill sets I had and see where they'd fit in. I knew I always enjoyed education. It was part of what we did. I was probably too old to go back on the tools. And so I had to look elsewhere, and my pathway to get into the education route was a little bit convoluted, but generally You just have to look at your skill sets and know where your strengths lie, and then look in that area to try and see where you can find employment.
Yeah, and I think, Darrell, you sort of touched on this. That we definitely have an emotional aspect to the maritime industry. It's a weird thing. Even though I came shoreside, and people often say, "Did you want to go back to sea?" And I sort of said, "No, my time had gone." That tie to the seagoing life, because of I related it back to my nan at the time, wasn't there. I love the maritime industry, and it's all I wanted to get back into. Darrell, what about yourself? The reasons for coming shoreside and the transition?
So yeah, as I say, I mean, I didn't want to come ashore. I just trained. I'd come out with my ticket and third mate's ticket, and was just part of that big, cull of the British seafarers then. So it's actually very disappointed to put all that training in and an investment by my company, and then not to build on that. I mean, many of us at that time were suffered under that, and then obviously the foreign flag conditions were nothing like what we were what I was used to. So that wasn't attractive either. So I guess there just wasn't the opportunity. There was just a huge number of us, chasing. It was last in first out approach at the time. So that's very different today, of course. Thankfully, there are much greater opportunities to stay on and progress, up through the ranks. But I could have pushed harder and stayed, but no. As I say, that there was a sort of serendipity whereby that opportunity of the ship operating firm in my near where I live came along, and I just thought, oh, well, I'll start that. But I just got so caught up in that, and then the continued training in that sphere. So I kind of stayed. But glad that I did. But no, you're right. The love of the sea, it stays with you. It's very much a vocation. And there, totally agree with you, both of you on that score.
Yeah, so just some of those common reasons that we've sort of picked up straight away. Personally, for me, family life through illness, but actually the detachation from family life, from that daily routine. It might be that you have a young family, you have a child. These things do have an effect. Sam, in your case, health. Okay, that can play a part over a period of time, and of course, health conditions do then affect ENG1s. Then you're looking at potentially having restricted ENG1s, which rely on a smaller pool of vessel types being able to be selected, career growth, or even just that need for a new challenge. Sam, where do you see the common reasons for coming ashore?
Um, I think I think generally it's family life that will change it for people. If you're unfortunate enough, like Darrell said, he was made unemployed. I was medically gone, but I think we'll see the majority of people leaving when their family circumstances change. We say it's a young person's game, and I think when you're younger, you see yourself going on and on. But once you have children, you've got family life, you've got commitments. The time away gets harder and harder. And although we've got our modern day communications and shorter routines for time away, uh, I think people ultimately their personal circumstances change, and especially again where there are a lot more female seafarers, people get into relationships with fellow seafarers, and when they're on different rotas, they just don't get to see people. And so you've got couples who are living a really good lifestyle, earning lots of money, but just aren't around to enjoy it. And I think ultimately one or both of them will finally cut and run and start to live what could be described as a normal life. But yeah, I see that most people are coming ashore because of family circumstances and changing relationships.
Yeah, and Darrell, on this sort of topic area, it used to be you'd have a career for life. Now, as the younger generation coming in, they're talking about 2 or 3 careers. I think statistically, I saw not too long ago that the typical expectation of a seafarer is between staying at sea between 8 and 12 years now
Exactly.
for the up and coming people. Talk to me a little bit about your perspectives and the work that you guys are doing at the Marine Society in terms of enabling and empowering people to come shoreside and understand the process.
Well, yeah, and I think it's actually less than that. I think I've heard quotes of 5 to 7 years average stay at sea. Perhaps get a master's ticket, leave before command experience possibly, but certainly that period at sea, that average is shortening and continues to do so. I mean, my view is that we need to build into sort of training, actually preparing them for when they do come ashore in the future, because it's just not in there. And then you find they don't have the the wherewithal or the knowledge how to sort of make that transition. So you reference the work that we do at the Marine Society, thank you, which is a specific program we set up 2020, late 2020, called the Coming Ashore program, which is a dedicated transition support for merchant navy seafarers. And you think the Royal Navy have a very well established resettlement program. I see Sam nodding.
Yeah.
And it's an excellent program with the CTP, and the training and the credits they get. There was nothing that I was aware of similar for the merchant navy. Very much left on your own to find your feet if you came ashore. And it actually came out of something around 2015, something called the Maritime Growth Study, where they did looked into the research of seafarers, because there was recognition that we need a pipeline of British seafarers coming into maritime professional services ashore, and it was trying to sort of ensure that pipeline going forward, and what was going to be put in place. So we, Marine Society at the time, was sort of selected as a charity that could provide that service. Just for various reasons, lack of funding and so on, it didn't really happen until shortly after I came into post. We secured funding, year-on-year funding to staff that and deliver this program. So yeah, it's not reaching huge numbers, but those that do go through the program are given mentoring support. We have a cadre of industry mentors working across maritime in various roles and sectors, or many of whom are ex-seafarers, of course, and they're willingly giving their time to support these individuals. And we have some great success stories of bringing them ashore into, and I stress, maritime related roles. We're not about losing them from the sector to no disrespect to other sectors, but I once heard of a cruise ship captain that ended up managing a Tesco supermarket. Well, those skills that he had could have been better served in the maritime sector. So we are very much, our funding of this very much around the outcomes for getting them into those roles. So I'll pause there in case you want to come back and ask for any clarification, but does that help?
Yeah, I think the big thing that I personally found was on a twofold here. It's educating seafarers to recognize their skill sets, the diversity of their skill sets, and just how important they are. But I also think work needs to be done in educating those shoreside in recognizing the skill sets, characteristics, the diversity that those who have been at sea have. I do feel it's a two-way process, and actually, we do want to retain people in the maritime industry, 100%. But even those just on the periphery, we talk about engineering, manufacturing, those areas.
Mm.
The amount of times I remember I came shoreside and I sat in a company applying for a job, a lifting company, and they turned around to me and said, "What's marine engineering got to do with lifting and slinging equipment?" And at that, it'll always sit with me. And I was sat there thinking to myself, I actually got up and walked out. Not because I wanted to be rude,
Mm.
because I sat there and thought to myself, there's a bigger challenge here for me. And it's actually getting people to recognize what the skill sets are. I've just got a few points that I've taken a note down here. A deck officer, leadership and crisis management, completely relatable to operations and logistics roles. Technical knowledge in terms of engineering, performance monitoring, maintenance, clear transferable skills to surveying, engineering, or maintenance and planning roles. Communication and teamwork across the entirety of the seafaring way. Training, HR, and client-facing positions, just to name but a few. Sam, what about for yourself? Where do you think that the skill set in terms of transferring from sea life to shoreside? How transferable do you feel they are?
Well, I'll pick up what Darrell said about people not totally recognizing what people do when they come away from sea. My first job when I left the Royal Navy, I actually turned up in uniform. I was in the transition period, and I got the job without even filling in an application form, because people understood the skill set of the armed forces. It's an unwritten sort of understanding of leadership, motivation, working alone, teamwork, all of those skill sets that are out there. And it's not something you see that's being sold by the merchant navy. You don't see the engineers, you don't see the deck officers being sold in the same way. They're people who keep the ships moving, but they don't understand the skill sets. I also think that a lot of what we've got will fill the apprenticeship gap. There aren't the apprenticeships out there in the same volume. When you come from sea and you've done your cadetship, you've done your tickets, even if you only get up to a third, you have demonstrated the skill sets that a modern day apprentice requires. But if you're savvy and you sell the fact that you've got the ability to work independently, that you've got the nous to go and do the job, I think people will buy into it. Very quickly they'll see that skill set that you've got. You can demonstrate that you've got the ability to work on such a variety of equipment, that I think it will sell itself. But it comes down to getting the person leaving to have the ability to recognize that they are unique. And I think that's part of the problem. We're not selling our unique abilities enough. We do the job, we do it well, we keep ships at sea, we keep the lights on. When we come ashore, people don't understand it.
Darrell?
Well, absolutely. And interestingly, Sam, with our Coming Ashore program, one of the things we find is the CVs that the seafarers, I mean, they have no idea how to sell themselves. Bless them. So they'll list their ships, they'll list their tickets, and but they won't talk about all those things you just mentioned. Those employability skills, softer skills, and all that. And I'd add things like work ethic and a diversity, ability to work with diverse people of all backgrounds and nationalities. These are really valuable things, but they can't express that on a CV. They don't actually recognize those skills they potentially bring to shore-based employers. So part of the mentoring scheme is we actually work with them to rewrite their CV. We bring in professional CV writers and just bring them up, create a LinkedIn profile, and sell them as a product, emphasizing, as I say, those skill sets. So no, totally agree.
Yeah, it's definitely it's literally my next point on my list of things to cover was how to reframe and tailor a CV to demonstrate those skill sets. But interestingly, it's not just the CV; it's then actually educating them how to transfer the CV into interview techniques and the change in. We've all seen it. We've all been in an interview, and it says, "Gives me an example of where you've had to adjust to diversity." And questions like that, problem solving and understanding how they transfer those skill sets as well. So in terms of those shoreside pathways themselves, because we've talked a little bit about why people come ashore, we've talked a little about our skill sets and how they're transferable. In terms of the common shoreside career routes, Dan, I think I'll probably come to you on this one. What do you see as those key career routes shoreside that some of those at sea have the opportunity to explore?
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to say it very much depends on, at what point you're exiting. Are you a junior officer, or do you have your master's, or do you have command experience? And all of those will take you on different pathways. So if we take, the master with command experience, typically they're going to go into superintendency, legal, arbitration, fleet management, type of roles, technical superintendent. So surveying, they've got, you would need to have command experience to sort of go in at that level. Underneath that, there's actually a whole host of maritime shore-based roles, that would suit a junior deck officer. And one thing they do also bring, which perhaps the older, more experienced seafarers don't have, is they are digitally savvy and digital natives. So they can come ashore and grasp systems far quicker than some of the older, salty sea dogs, if I can put it that way. So, swings and roundabouts. So our most successful employer recruiting coming ashore mentees on our program is actually the MCA. I joke with them, say we're not your recruiting arm, but we seem to keep placing people in various teams there and so on. But no, I think a range of different roles, that we're getting them into across the maritime. It's so diverse, as we all know. So lots of real opportunities for seafarers coming out at whatever stage of their seafaring career.
Sam, what about from an engineer's perspective?
Um, I just think there are so many opportunities from the fact that you could come out with your thirds and go and work as um, a sort of a roving engineer with a company as a specialist maintainer. I think that goes a long way. I know quite a few people who've gone in at quite low level superintendent sort of or assistant superintendent roles and very quickly have moved up the chain, primarily because they've got the mindset that will take them very quickly. They're not limited by certain rules, and I think that's one of the advantages. And also I think, again, you hammer on about electricians. If you've got an electrical background, the world is crying out for people who can play with a magic string and stuff. And I think, again, you've got to look at what your strengths lie, is whether or not you want to be doing that. And I think there are so many opportunities. And Darrell made the point about using such service providers as LinkedIn. If you spend a bit of time and you actually put your flag up that people can see it, and the work will come looking for you, not necessarily you looking for the work. And I think that's probably one of the key points.
Yeah, I think there's two things I want to address on sort of discuss around that. I think we're seeing more and more maritime clusters pop up now, and these have been a massive input. So you've got Maritime Solent, it looks after the Solent area. You've got Teesside Maritime, Joe up there is doing some fantastic work. Obviously, Lorna and Stuart down in Maritime Solent. You've got the Maritime Cluster in Mersey. You've got the southwestern regions. That there's so many popping up that are bringing companies together and working with memberships. On top of that, you've got the work such as the Marine Society. We've got the various different clusters, and actually LinkedIn is a magical place for that to connect with those and talk. Darrell,
Yes, well, I mean, don't forget that you've got the membership bodies. I mean, there's IMAREST. Our program is accredited by them, obviously the engineering side, and then there's the Nautical Institute. Obviously, they're a deck officer membership, but they recognise that their members come ashore, and they very much support and promote our program, through their publications. So those are other, networking connections that benefit seafarers transitioning ashore. So very much recommend that they reach out to those organisations.
Just to add to that, there is also things such as colleges have their own sort of support systems, and if you take Walsash, they've got the Walsash Association, which is huge on experienced seafarers. And again, it's a networking, and I always try and get people encouraged to get in and get involved with these organisations. Just even if it's just to press the flesh a bit and start linking up with these people.
Yeah, we're certainly going to be doing an episode on support networks and those services that are that are available and out there. But again, just giving sort of an overview of the different pathways: ship management and operations, marine insurance, law and regulation, ports and terminals and logistic roles, maritime education and training, of course, our own personal background. Everyone here, and especially this is a huge one that's coming in, and you'll see it more and more: technology and sustainability roles, not to mention the massive gap in skilled maritime professionals shoreside, outside of boat building or inside of boat building and marinas, the transferable skills there. There's a shortage at sea, there's a shortage on shore. So just moving on, challenges in the transition. Where are we finding the difficulties? Me personally, it's the change in work dynamic and routine. I think you do see I think it's two sets of people really. You get those who come shoreside, they love it, they go back to normal work routine. And I've also seen the flip side where you see people come shoreside and within 6 months they're back at sea. Darrell, what are your feelings on this?
Well, we call that the yo-yo effect, Owen, in our program. So you're exactly right. The ones they come ashore, they do 6 months, They think, do you know what? I miss the money. I miss, they just don't make that transition, and they go back and they do another contract at sea, and then they're back again, and so on and so forth. So part of our program is to help them, make informed choice. We actually plan about a year's worth of mentoring. We set milestones for them, so they're not just sort of rushing ashore and then finding it's not working. It's very much a planned progress. But I think the other challenge you kind of touched on there was the sort of work environment. Going from a strong command and culture routine on a ship, hierarchical, and then into the sort of modern office environment, very flat structure. That is a challenge for someone to sort of, they want to, give or take orders, and that just doesn't operate. And so, one thing we try to do, and I know some companies already operate this, is some form of placement, shoreside placement, whilst they're still at sea. I know Stolt Tankers, a great example, Anglo Eastern. They will allow their seafarers to come and spend a couple of months, 2 or 3 months, in a super's role or something in the office, just to give them a taste. And that is so helpful for them, to make an informed decision. Do they actually like a 9 to 5 job? Is that, do they like commuting and strange things like that they're not used to? So those are very forward-thinking companies that allow that. But no, by and large, the challenges of making that transition, can turn pear-shaped if they haven't really thought through some of the, some of those sort of practical things they've got to adapt, the adaptation to coming ashore.
Sam, what are your thoughts on this?
Again, the yo-yo effect is quite true. I think I came from an environment, although I did 27 years, it was 27 years in one uniform, but numerous jobs. I did 3 years on a ship, 3 years in a shore-based establishment, doing whatever the Royal Navy required me. So over that period of time, I'd constantly changed a job role every 3 years. And so coming ashore, all of a sudden, that to think I'm now here, this could be me till I'm pushing up the daisies, was quite scary. And at the end of 3 or 4 years, you get twitchy. You feel that you've got to try and change. And the other thing I found, I take on board what Darrell said about culture. I found that I genuinely miss the banter. I was constantly looking over my shoulder to be politically correct. I'm not suggesting that we go around being politically
It's true.
incorrect, but when you're sat there and you're working with people who've never worked in your environment or understand the fact that you live with people 24 hours a day when you're at sea, and therefore you get that banter between yourselves. We've had it in the office when we've worked together, Owen. We'd be fired, but because we understand each other, we do it in a respectful way, and we work in a multicultural office, and we got away with it, not because we were rude to anyone, but everybody understood the banter, and they dished it back as well. And for me, that was one of the hardest things I missed. People who understood the fact that I was prepared to work hard, but I also wanted to be humoured as well along the way. So it was very difficult.
For me, on a personal thought, there's 2 that come to mind. The first is self-doubt. I think when you understand that people recognize seafaring experience, they recognize the ticket, they recognize what you do, what it's about. I think a lot of self-doubt starts to sit in when you come shoreside, and people start asking questions of, well, what does that have to do with this job, or what's that? I think it can be quite a dangerous spiral quite quickly. And it's good to see that programs like what you're offering, Darrell, it helps to build up that confidence in that skill set. But the other thing is, and I personally struggle with this even now, is I always felt at sea everyone had a common goal, they had a common drive, they would pull together, and you would see everyone jumping in. One of the things I struggled with slightly, and I still do, is that idea that when you come shoreside, people will come in, do their job, go home, and that's maybe it's not with everyone, but that culture of at sea, we've got to get this done. We don't move unless it gets done. You don't see that shoreside. So sometimes I think levels of tolerance from other people and yourself, in terms of recognizing that everyone doesn't have the same thought process, I think that can be a little bit difficult.
Recognize that totally. Yeah. That loss of, as you quite rightly say, the camaraderie, the fact your workplace is your home place, you don't go home at night, and then you come ashore and then everyone switches off at 5 and then you don't see them. It just doesn't, generate, as I say, that anything like that sort of close-knit community that you refer to. And certainly I personally, I miss that, but it's been many years, but it's something that they do sort of struggle with initially, as you say.
But it does create a frustration because you can see the fact that there's nothing worse than working with somebody who at 5 o'clock drops the lid on their laptop and walks out the door, when you're sitting there thinking, well, something still needs to be finished, and it creates a frustration, and the only person who manages it is you, because you're used to having tolerance, and that can also be quite debilitating. So yeah, I think we've all encountered it.
Yeah. And I'm certainly not saying this as a negative to put people off. It's, again, this podcast is all about raising awareness, setting expectations, and looking at both sides. The best thing for me personally about coming shoreside was seeing the family and all of those type of things, and getting to go and watch the mighty cherries down on the south coast more regularly. So there's swings and roundabouts all over the place. Preparing for life ashore. A huge part of this is Darrell, you've sort of banged on about it, and it's really important to do so. Support networks, training programs, mentorships, setting expectations, making sure you have a family network around you.
Yeah.
But realistically, some of the key things I just want to quickly talk about is education and certification, upgrades and changes, networking, and being financially and emotionally ready.
Well, let me give you, a top tip on the education and training piece is use your time at sea to study for shoreside. So you've got long leave periods, you've got periods at sea, you undertake a distance learning degree program, whatever it is, in law, whatever, insurance, so that you're using that time while you've got it. So when you make that transition, you've got yourself something, academically wise, that will get you up to that level. So very much encourage seafarers to do that, use that time wisely, rather than ditch it, come ashore, and then find you've got to go away and study whilst you're not earning. So that would be my first tip on that. So yeah, I think we've kind of touched on some of the networking side of it, in terms of connecting with the trade bodies, membership bodies, unions, and so on, and going out to the trade fairs, going to the events, and getting around, the London Shipping Week and all of these things that are possible. So and I think the last one was around sort of, I think, family, wasn't it, and finances. Well, the finances, obviously, again, very much depending on where you're at when you come ashore. There's no shoreside salary that is likely to compete with a tax-free master salary. Not in, so people have to really adjust their expectations of their earning capacity, and they do get a shock when they get told what they're going to be paid, and then there's a thing called income tax, that comes as a shock, and so on. So this all sounds very banal, but these are the realities of coming ashore from deep sea, and so we have to help them navigate that side. I think family wise, actually, it can be a stress. I'm not being funny, but the family then have to adjust to you being around all the time. Having worked in a situation where you go away for long periods at sea, and then leave periods, to moving to to a sort of 9-to-5 basis, that can place additional stresses and demands that you perhaps hadn't thought through on the family. So yeah, I think there are challenges there too.
From my point of view, it's like you say, coming ashore. I just remember having an argument once because I put the bins out on a set day, and it was something I'd never had to do. And whilst it seems trivial, there's an awful lot of things, and you have to perhaps sit down and have a proper discussion about what roles you're going to undertake when you're there. You're not around most of the time, so if you start paying bills and sorting this out and that out, and all of a sudden you undermine the person who's at home, who's kept the home fires burning, and that can create all sorts of issues. And in many respects, I think that's what drives people away and drives them back to sea, because they like to just go back to the stability. And also understanding what things cost at home. When you come back from sea, it's a short period of time. It's a bit of a party. You're spending out money hand over fist, because you want to enjoy life. You go on a holiday, you eat out an awful lot of the time. But when you're living at home, and as Darrell said, you're going to have a reduced income. All of a sudden, the reality that you're not going to be living the highlights for, sort of 10 weeks at a time, it can also become quite depressing. It can knock you down. So again, like you say, mentally prepare yourself, understand what life really costs outside the world when you've got a wallet full of cash or a bank with an endless banker's card.
I'm just going to summarize it with just one word: research.
Yeah.
I think you have to do your research and don't be afraid to do it. And obviously, sometimes things happen that should cause you to make decisions a bit more quicker, such as my scenario. And actually, in hindsight, even now, research it as a cadet, as a first officer, junior engineer. Always know and keep an eye out on what the routes are, where you're at, and continuously be aware of it, because you just don't know what's going to happen.
Offer up one more other thing, which is I think we need to mention what I'd call a halfway house option, which is going into the sort of restricted, the coastal sector where you are, are you shoreside, are you seagoing? You've kind of got the best of both. You might be doing a 2 week on, 2 week off rotation on a crew transfer vessel or whatever it may be, but you are, so there is that whole world of seagoing, but going home, much shorter rotations. So you can sort of combine semi being at sea, but also being shoreside. So I think just worth mentioning that a lot of deep sea come ashore and then will work in that coastal sector.
So I just thought we'd answer just a few points, just each here. So, Sam, if I start with you, what does being shoreside bound mean to you personally?
I'm going to say the obvious one, but I think it's family. It's about stability. It's about making sure people know exactly what's going to be happening. There's no ambiguity. You know when your leave is going to be. You know what time you're going to come home. Even down to the fact you know exactly how much you're going to be earning within a ballpark, so you can budget, and it just gives you a reasonable sense of security from everyone else around you. I think the mental pull to go back to sea and live in that environment is something you have to sort out in your own head, and set your own standards where you're going to go. If you go too early, you're going to be in a dilemma. You've got to go at the right time, and it's got to be understood by both sides of your sort of living arrangements. Even if you're living alone, you've still got to be comfortable with yourself. How you made the change.
Darrell, what about yourself? What does being shoreside bound mean to you personally?
I guess it is something Sam mentioned, but having certainty, and building routine into your life where you know where you're going to be. You can build sort of social, more of a social life, hobbies and so on and stuff outside of the work environment. Uh, that all becomes more possible and easier. So yeah, I think you covered it. Those sort of, I think the sort of the key areas, but career can then develop in all sorts of other routes. Becoming shoreside, you're not on a fixed path that you would be, say, in the merchant navy, where it's just fairly linear. But coming shoreside, maritime professional services, a whole range of things where you can take you into all sorts of directions that you perhaps never even imagined. So I think all of that is a wealth of opportunity.
Yeah, and for me, I would just summarize it as one door closes, another door opens.
Mm.
So just opportunity. Don't look back with negativity, look forward with possibility. So just to tie it up then, obviously, I think we'd all say the life at sea has shaped all of us of who we are and who we are now. It set expectations. It personally made me grow up very quickly. Um, and it sets that tolerance, the attributes, and there's lots of lessons there and characteristics that no matter what we do, we can bring them shoreside and be of huge value. So just thank you very much to both of you. Sam, as always, thank you for joining us. But Darrell, thank you very much for joining us and taking the time out of your day to come and provide your thoughts, your expertise, but also just highlighting that program that people can have access to and the good work that the Marine Society and Sea Cadets are doing.
Oh, thank you so much. Appreciate the endorsement.
Thank you very much, both.